I was very excited as a new superintendent to know that there was a grading policy task force convened. My experience across the country has been that this is work that districts are just starting to dig deep in. And what's most impressive is that this work is coming from the teachers in all of our schools. The grading work is essential to student success. It's essential to student outcomes. It's essential to students having better access to college and post-secondary opportunities. So I really appreciate that teachers have embraced this work, have really become grounded in the research, and are really leading the way as it relates to the grading work, because ultimately it's going to lead to better outcomes and success for our students.
We definitely want teachers to drive this. This is why we're extending our pilot. We want to hear from teachers in classrooms with students and even the feedback that they get from families.
It's a grading reform, I guess you would call it. Anytime you say that, the reform, people kind of get nervous because when you think about that word, it's an overhaul of it. But it's not. It's what we're doing. We're just improving on what we're doing. It's just a different way of setting up and evaluating how we are actually tracking that learning.
This is really important because traditional grading, I don't feel really shows what students are capable of doing. The standard-based grading system really allows the students and the parents to really see what their child is capable of doing, their strengths, their weaknesses, their areas of improvement. It gives the students very specific feedback so they themselves take ownership for their own learning, and it motivates them to want to do well and to want to master these standards.
This is definitely not a trend. And the fact that we're doing it should be heralded, because we probably should have been looking at how we do our grading probably a long time ago.
It is not. It's really changed my entire philosophy and my mindset on teaching.
Very excited about these practices and policies, and I wish I would have known about them many years ago.
I've worked with school districts all around the world, in all 50 states and more than 30 countries. And I can tell you, whether I'm in Cleveland Heights or whether I'm in Tasmania, south of Australia, everybody's talking about grading. Everybody's talking about homework. Most of my work around the country and around the world is on high poverty systems. And I know that doesn't represent every school in Cleveland Heights, but let's be frank, we do have some high poverty schools in Cleveland Heights, University Heights, and let's be honest about that. So I want to make two observations. Number one, in the schools that I've studied, that are more than 90% free and reduced lunch. When we implement grading reform, the DF rate goes down dramatically. The lowest number I've seen is about 30% decline in DFs. I've also seen 80 to 100% declines in DFs. But whether it's 30% or 80%, it's still way better than we were in the past.
So when we think about grades it's that one place where it connects home and school and sort of speaks to achievement. It speaks to where students are in their way of accessing curriculum and their level of mastery around content. And so when we think about a grade, it should make sense.
When we had met as our team, and keep in mind that there are multiple teachers within grade levels, we figured that many teachers have different styles. Some use percents, some used points, some will give participation points, extra credit for just bringing tissues. Bringing in tissues is not reflection of learning.
At the elementary level, we're focused on really looking at the individual state standards and assessing students on their proficiency of the individual standards. Instead of giving them an overall grade for the entire trimester for, say, reading or math, we're breaking it down into all the individual standards or learning targets and looking, are they mastering each and every standard?
So the point is that we have a set of standards provided by the state of Ohio, and we want to make sure all students are proficient or mastering those standards. And if teachers are having those conversations about the standards and how they're grading the standards and grading the students on those standards and streamlining that, we can ensure that all students are receiving equitable grades. So just saying, this is what I'm assessing, it's no longer a Chapter 3 test. It's breaking it down and saying these are the specific targets that I'm actually expecting students to master.
before I started piloting this, I was a more traditional grader. I kind of lumped everything together, whether it was homework, tests, quizzes, presentations, everything was averaged into one final letter grade, where this really breaks it down, and it really allows me to see the individual students, their strengths, their weaknesses, and what I need to do as an educator to help them grow.
In the real world, you make mistakes. You make mistakes in college, you make mistakes in the job, you get feedback. And let me tell you, one other thing that I've heard from college professors and employers is that when you make a mistake and you get feedback, what we want you to do is to use that feedback to get better. What we don't want you to do is call your mom and say, I got a bad report, I got a bad evaluation. Come on. In the real world, making mistakes is part of the job. It's part of college. It's part of what we want students to be able to learn from. So all these ideas in grading reform is not coddling kids. It's about giving them honest, blunt feedback and then using the feedback to get better. And to tie this all in a bow, that is why one of the fundamental issues of grading reform is you don't use the average. You expect kids to make mistakes, and then a breakthrough. And you evaluate them at the breakthrough point, whether they're a college student, whether in community college, trade school, or on the job. It's the breakthrough that we really want to reward.
So I think that the best way is to say it's getting us moving away from putting generic grades in the book. And so when we look at our grade books, we can actually say this learning target has been met at this level. And it's not just saying, oh, they scored an 80% on this unit test and not even knowing what's on it. So it does help you actually, with your teams, look at student learning and see how to improve it because it's specifically targeted to student learning.
At the middle school level, we have multiple teachers teaching the same content. So what we're trying to do is we need more consistency and less subjectivity. We're trying to make sure the grades reflect learning. And with zeros, it's not a reflection of learning, it's just missing work. So a lot of times you'll find that students are actually capable and understand the material, but just did not do the work for whatever reason, due to absences or fear of failure has been a big one. So giving them the opportunities to demonstrate learning.
It's a conversation we've had often at the high school, especially in the math department, because we are trying to be consistent. So it takes away the teacher component. So whether they have me or another teacher for the same subject, they should be receiving the same grade if they're scoring the same for that learning target. So I think it's something that we want to make sure you can walk into every classroom and look at every teacher's grade book and see the same learning outcomes for the students and see that they are all being graded fairly and accurately and that it's not based on other components.
The one adjustment I had made is considering that math is a process, specifically when I'm teaching math, that there is different stages in the learning process. So with that, I've been less punitive to students while they're practicing. So meaning if they show that they're got the right procedures and they're showing that they understand it and they just maybe make a minor computational error or they forget a positive or negative sign, they're unable to get partial credit. And getting partial credit helps students become more confident.
You know, when you're talking about a tool like Infinite Campus, where it is a portal that's built for, communication, it crosses a lot of domains within our district, so it's right there, and it's very easily done, not without some challenges, within the portal that we're already using. So you're not talking about buying something new that supports all of our staff, our families, and our students. It's already there.
I think most people are on board, and it's not that much of a shift. The difference is how you're entering your grades in the gradebook. So it should be based on standards, so that when a parent, an administrator, the student looks at that gradebook, they can specifically see, I did not do well in this learning target. What do I need to do to improve on that?
And that, one of the things we talk about too is that they're actionable. So if there is some need for me to do something at home or encourage my student to push a little bit further in an area, what are the grades telling me to do? What is this feedback telling me to do?
I would just say it's important for teachers to try to at least set up their gradebook in a way that is user-friendly for parents and students. Those are the major stakeholders. If we want them to be asking how to improve their grades, how to make sure that they are mastering this content, starting with that gradebook is one piece for parents to look at. It's an open platform for students and parents, administration to look at, and it should be user-friendly.
One of the biggest challenges in grading reform is yeah, that's all nice, Doug, for the low-achieving kids, reducing the DF rate, but what about my kid? What about my kid who's high-achieving, my kid who got it right the first time? It's a fair question. So let's talk to the parents and the teachers of high-performing, high-achieving kids. Number one, here's how it benefits you, because we have more electives. Every time we have fewer repeaters, we have another section of advanced placement classes, another section of international baccalaureate, another section of just high interest classes that our most advanced students want. What most high achieving kids do, schoolmanship. They know how to play the game. They know how to get points. But you want to know what teachers are telling me? When we have grading reform, the subject changes from how can I get more points to what do I need to learn? And that is precisely the conversation we want them to have in college. It's not about points, it's about learning.
I am very excited about this, all of the positive outcomes and changes I've seen in my students. And the biggest one I would have to say is probably the feedback. Instead of just putting a score of 8 out of 10 or something like that on a paper, I'm sitting down and having really authentic conversations with my students. And they're taking those detailed, very specific comments from me away, and they're sitting down and they're putting them into action.
I have noticed a lot more participation and a lot less failing grades, but I believe we need a little bit more buy-in from the rest of the staff, and then a lot more time to actually implement and make this actually work across the board.
I wish that that more people would learn from Cleveland Heights, University Heights. Frankly, what happens elsewhere is that it's all top-down, and the board will adopt a 20-page single-space policy and say this is how it's going to be, and nothing happens. In this district, by contrast, it was bottom-up. The teachers created it, they owned it, they experimented with it, so there's a lot of local ownership from pre-K to 12. That's the sort of thing that makes change really happen and makes it endure.
I'm a mom in this district. I'm a parent, but I'm also an alum. And so when I think about the accessibility of information and understanding, education moves pretty slow and rapidly at the same time. Mandates change, information changes. The request for buy-in is always shifting, but we don't always give entry points. So when I think about family engagement and I think about the importance of our community really being able to rally behind what we do, clarity is essential. And if we think in terms of, we're all going to be successful together or fail together, you got to be on the same page. And I think this to me, when I think about my work in regard to family engagement and bringing in the community as stakeholders and sharing the responsibility of our success, got to make it clear. And this is a great way to do that.
What I would say to someone who is skeptical about adopting these guidelines is they really should have been established many years ago. We definitely do need them. And you need to ask yourselves, do grades matter? Do your grades matter? And don't we want consistency? Don't we want to be fair? Don't we want our students to succeed and have multiple opportunities to demonstrate that?
I think it's something that will be the way of grading in the future, and I think a lot of school districts are already doing this. A lot of teachers within our own district are already doing this and exploring how you can actually make it fair.
I think raise your hand. There's support available. I know our data department is there to help with that. I know we have leaders in the district who believe in this work. So I don't think you have to throw a very far stone to find somebody who can help you with this. And that's, from your grade book. Teachers are doing it. They're trying it. Speak to one of your coworkers. They can tell you what their successes and challenges are. And I think what we have to do is just keep figuring it out together and get there.
We just want everyone to sign up to pilot so that we can gather the data that we need and make a very good and sound recommendation for Cleveland Heights, because I truly believe this is the way to go.